And we're here to the first panel of the day on daily life in Dunhuang. My name is Luk Yuping. I'm from the British Museum, and I'll be the moderator for this panel. So without further ado, may I introduce the first speaker of this panel, Arnaud Bertrand, who is curator of the Ancient China and Korea departments at the Musée Guimet. The topic that he will talk about today is All Quiet on the Western Front, New Archaeological Insights on the Dunhuang Imperial Commandery during the Han Dynasty. Please welcome Dr. Bertrand.
Good morning. It's good to be back in London. It's been a while. And it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for the organizers to have invited me and for me to present some, well, I would say some research going on in France on the Northwest. So the Thousand Buddha is absolutely fascinating. I've been living in Dunhuang for some time. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to talk about 6 centuries before, around the Han Dynasty, 2nd, 1st century BC, which is generally the period that people don't really look at, except for text. And I've been doing a lot of archaeological mission in the West with Dunhuang Imperial for some time. So it's going to be a talk that brings research on both text and, you would say, prospections in the Northwest. That's a good question, right? Why Dunhuang there? Why did they put a commandery in this spot? When you look at geography, well, we say it's logical. It's complex. It's very complex. The geography of Dunhuang, the spaces, the difficulty to have access to the Northwest. Do we have a laser here? Yeah. Maybe not. So, maybe like at the university. Never. Yeah. Okay. Doesn't matter. You know what Dunhuang is. Thank you, the organizers, for. So Dunhuang is very well located, of course, very central, but there's about 1,500 kilometers, a bit more, to get to Chang'an during the Han Dynasty. The same, you would say, the same eagle trip going to Kashgar. Longshan is supposed to be one of the capital of the Xiongnu, so I've indicated there, around 1,200 kilometers north, and Lhasa on the south is around 1,500 kilometers south. So it is as close to Central Asia than to the Himalayan plateau, than to the Gobi Mongolian steppe, to inland Yellow River, China. So it is a place like all the Oasis in this center where you have always cosmopolitanism, and clearly it's not as Chinese or Central Asia. It's very complex space. And when you look at Dunhuang in the center, you have to go back to text. That's, of course, everything we know of. When you look at the Hanshu Daily 28A and B, you have an information about how the Han Dynasty organized their expansion in the 2nd century BC, around 130 BC during the Emperor Wu. So the yellow part is the main, you would say, the main districts, you would say Guanzhong in Chinese, which is inside the Chinese land, and everything in blue is the commanderies which have been formed on the frontier places, both in the south and in the northeast and in the northwest. In general, that's what we know for the 1st century census. We have 1/8 of the population which has been deported in these places to occupy these new regions. When we say new regions, we talk about the Chinese perspective, of course. So when you look at the different places, how they acted, how they organized these commanderies, it's quite interesting. When you look at the northwest and the northeast, northeast, which would be today's, you would say, North Korea. In the northwest, the Hexi Corridor, which is this part going from the Yellow River of one part to the Gobi region and to the Taklamakan on the west, you started from one commandery, which is Xuanquan Zhongye, so this is the red part. And then the second step was to divide this space in two. Northwest, you would say, that would be Western Gansu, and Central Gansu, Qiuquan on one side, Zhongye on the other. And this is better than the laser. And then it was too complex, too big. So they had it divided again in two, which you have Zhongye on one side, Xiuquan, and then, of course, Dunhuang. And finally, when they knew that they could operate properly this region, they finalized with Wuwei, which is a paradox because Wuwei is the most closest, I would say, to the Yellow River, so mainland China. When you look at the Korean part, the same problematic. They look at how they're going to build the commanderies on the west and on the east, and then they're going to shrink it down. So this is important because when we talk about 1 century of time, everything is changing all the time. There's movement all the time. And I would say that this movement can be, of course, interested by written sources, which are the ones we have access to. Of course, some of our contemporary of these conquests, such as the Sheti, Taiyuan Yezhuan, or a bit later, the Hanshu reminder is 160 years after the conquest. Hohanshu is around 520 years after the conquest. And I'm not talking about the Tongquan because it's too far away. And on the other side, of course, we have, and I'm not going to talk about those, of course, because my colleague Alexis Likas, it's funny because Alexis and I, we are always one after the other, for many, many years now. So we know exactly what we're going to talk about. So I'm not going to talk about Dunhuang geography text. He says it's much better than me, but they are, of course, existent, and they give information about ruins, ancient sites within which, these new commanderies, especially during the medieval time, are going to settle down. Look at Chang'an, for example. There's a logic why you have the Hanling Academy in the Tang Dynasty in the western part of Chang'an, because it's exactly where you had the ruins of ancient Han Dynasty Chang'an. So to be in this constant, you would say, occupation of ancient time. And of course, you have the archaeological missions, which is some part of why we're here today, of course, is the missions both made by the British Aurel Stein, Hungarian British Aurel Stein on one point, the Sweden exhibition, I would say about archaeological mission, because when Sven Hedin arrived in China, he said, we're going to make an investigation of the Northwest, and China said, we don't need to make an exploration, we know our country, don't worry, we're going to do a collaboration. And it was a collaboration at one point with them, with Huang Wenbi, who continued working in Lulan and Turfan afterwards. All these have been well documented, of course. We have the information. We have these very important documents on which I will come back afterwards, of course, which have been unearthed during the time where I think Oasis in part was trying to get access to this Mogawa cave. And interesting enough, at this point, there was no separation between materials. They had both interests in, you would say, metalware, ceramics, textiles, anything concerning ancient traces of human presence in this part, and of course, documents. These are all these documents which have been discovered since then until today. We arrive at around, I would say, 80,000 wooden slips, but don't take the number as I think it's more than 100,000 now. It depends what we talk about, one slips or medi. Anyhow, there's a lot of work going on this, and our Chinese colleagues have done a lot of great work and publications on this. Now, we go back to the original question. You see, these are the lines of the Dunhuang part commandery, where we have all these lines that just indicate how the travels were working. Administrative lines, administrative roads. You have the northern part is the military line, close to this Great Wall section, for which we have all these texts which have been discovered. And on the south part is on the northern part of the Weishan. So it's this there. There's nothing. You don't have any hand settlements, no fortifications, no forts, no Great Wall. At one point when we were doing the prospection, we thought there was something here, but it's much later. It's during the Tibetan Tang period. So the Han people, they were not crazy. They knew exactly where they had to settle. And when we have one specific site, which is very important, of course, is Xuanquan. Now I'm going to put a pretty picture. It's important to put a pretty picture at this moment, which is this one. Xuanquan is very important space where we have a whole legend about how it was built. Li Guangli, who went to Fergana Valley, and he came back and he wanted some water. He put a sword in the mountain and water came out, which of course I didn't try. But it's called Xuanquan, suspending sources. And at this place, apart from all the archaeological missions that have been done between 1989 and 1992, we have the archaeologists of Lanzhou, Kaogusuo, and working with Dunhuang and Boguan, they have discovered around 35,000 documents with 20,000 containing text. Now, these texts have been put, in what we call, you would say, it's like a big digital space where these documents are not used anymore. And Xuanquan is important because it confirms somehow the date of foundation of the commandery of Dunhuang, supposedly, which was 111 BCE. So we have different kind of chronology concerning the foundation. Some sources talk about 88, 87, some a bit earlier. But then we have this text, which have been mainly published a lot, and saying it's always partial. We don't have complete text, which talk about the date of 111 BCE. And this is a document discovered in Xuanquan. So from there, and as you can see, the document talks about horses and transmitting messages. It's very, it's about legal text, administrative documents, of course. This document has been used afterwards to say that, well, we know now that Dunhuang was founded in 111, and also you had civilian administration placed already at this age. And I'm confirming that's not possible at all. Not possible. I'll show you why. You'll be convinced at the end. No, you still have 10 minutes with me, and then it's finished. Then we have the coffee break when you can say, I don't agree with you, that's okay. So what we have in the context is 190 BC is an important date. We have the Xiongnu who have stopped fighting for one part, the death of Huo Qibing, his tomb, very famous. Resumption of trade, Central Asia. We have construction of canals around the Yellow River, looking at the Hexi Corridor, and there's Zhang Xian who goes for a second mission to the Wuzun, and as the first one, it didn't work out. And in 111 BCE, the same date, the Xiongnu and the Xiong are the Proto-Tibetans, they have made a coalition destroying the forts of this Han conquest in the west, and from this resumes the expansion of the Chinese in the west, because they had no intention to go further west. It's a lot of money, a lot of people, so they prefer taking the Wuzun and putting them closer to their bridge. It's a lot of diplomacy, exactly like it works in the Tang Dynasty, for example. So if we think that this document from Xuanquan is authentic of 111, we have another document, which is a wall inscription in Xuanquan that talks about, sorry, it's in French, a protocol of 50 articles about prescriptions, monthly prescriptions. It's been published by George VII. And what we know is that this document was issued from Chang'an. Normally you have it here. Issued, there we go. Issued from Chang'an, then arrived in Xuanquan from, different relays. Then there it was copied by the scribes in Xuanquan, then transmitted to its final destination, and then the final message arrives in Dunhuang. Now, if you take this 1st century AD document from Wang time, the Qing Dynasty, it takes about 3 to 4 months to arrive from Chang'an to Dunhuang. So it could be completely 111 BC. But what we have in this document is clearly not from this period, because it talks about the name of Emperor Wu is given as as the Emperor Wu after he died. So it's his official name, and especially we have here the number of characters which were copied, and this clearly indicates that we are in the case of a prescription. Which means that, it's logical. We have a lot of legal texts which have been issued 50 years ago and still are used 50 years after. And they continue to be transmitted to the northwest in the frontier, exactly like, sorry to take a French example, like, for example, the Traité de Villers-Cotterêts, who is quoted in 2019, and this one dates from 1539. So we know that these legal texts were coming in from Chang'an and still are used and copied at the court. Now, the other reason why we know that Xuanquan was not built, and especially the Dunhuang Commandery did not start working as a civilian space in this area, besides political problematics, is that all the other documents date from 80 BCE, maximum around, okay, and of course go down to the 1st century AD. If you look at, for example, so this is from the Xiaogu, which is a district within which Xuanquan was inside. You'll see a map afterwards. But this is the full general documents we have from Xuanquan that give dates we have of this presence of civilians, and they all date from the 80, 70 BCE. In fact, this document that was discovered in Xuanquan was not even during an archaeological excavation. It was during a preliminary prospection, which is very different because it's what we call in French ramassage de surface. You know, we bring out some documents, but we don't really have knowledge and stratigraphy. The other documents, in fact, all date from the 70, 60 BC. So this is a very pretty and horrible map. I apologize. And all my people, people look at it, just, Arnaud, do something better. Yes, but I don't have time. I'm doing a lot of exhibitions at the same time. I can't change it. So deal with this one for now. But this is not for publication, maybe for painting or something. So what we have is that we have Xuanquan in white here. Xuanquan is related to Xiaogu Xian, which is a district of Xiaogu. You have this river here, you know, the general river that makes a bridge, a frontier with this Dunhuang place where you have the city and which relates to the north part of the delta. And then you have Longle, which is a very important district which I will talk about very quickly afterwards. The other districts are Guangzhou in the middle, Ming and on the eastern part, and Yuanxuan, which is also another district. All those have been related in these official sources, and we find them also in Xuanquan. Xuanquan is important because it's the only, to our date, well-stratigraphic archaeological site where we can have these dates and where we talk about civilians, of course. So in general, we have 38,000 people working and living in Dunhuang, shrinking down to 29,000 around the 1st century AD. But again, you have to look at the different scope. Bon, I have 5 more minutes, so I have to be a bit quicker now. But this is the important part. What we know is that Xuanquan is working exactly as a process of building a commandery in these places. It's a lot of experiments. It's human experience and time. A lot of time to understand control and political problematics in the northwest. Of course, Zhang Qian, you know, didn't work alone to go to Bactrian. You know, he had a lot of people who understood the language and this geography, complex geography. So first part is that you build forts to control communication routes and trade. Then you need to analyze water, agricultural resources. And in the final part, you build this Great Wall line. And of course, after that period, you start bringing civilians there to occupy the space. You can see it in Xuanquan. I'll go a bit quick on this one. Xuanquan is first probably a ting, which is a relay and fort, and then becomes a zhi. We say always, 这是宣传纸, 宣传纸. Ah, 等一下, wait a bit. It's not a zhi. It could be a ting first. Now, it's maybe a small difference, but it's important in time. And then Xuanquan is inside the district of Xiaogu, which is the main magistrate who organizes this place. And you see the forts, we see them in archaeological missions. For example, this is a site, Liaogong, which is in central part of the Dunhuang Commandery. You have one fort here, and the city which was built around it, which is a bit later. Same site, 80 kilometers distance. These are the other sites which are the magistrate capitals of the district. You always have a fort, a little square fort from the beginning, from which it's built. You see that also in the Zhangye region, which is in central. You have the map, one done, and you see here. This is the continuity of a fort of the Han Dynasty period, which has been continued rebuilt. And this is a wall dating from the Qinwei Tang period, which is the ones which are probably described in the Dunhuang manuscripts. Now I have to speak quickly because I have 2 more minutes. I'm trying to close in time. So, for example, the Jade Gate, for example, is the same thing. You have this fort which has been continued to be working during the Tang period, which wasn't the Jade Gate at this time. And you have this entire space, which is, of course, the main city. And if you look at Central Asia, where I've been doing a lot of digging in Uzbekistan, this is Termez, Alexander the Great, Termez, the citadel first, and then the city, au Campir Tepe, first exactly the same example. It just makes sense. So, sorry, it's a long one. Silence is important. Because it's, okay. So, Xuanquan is of course important because we have documents. Here you have two sites, Tianshui 1 and 2, which have been excavated in 1971-73. Tout le monde s'en fout in French, right? No one cares about those because we didn't have documents. We only have this, coins, and of course different elements of life. But where is the work on the ceramics, on the textiles, on, you know, this work needs to be done, and it's now done, of course, in the Chinese side, but for publications, we need to put them in relation with the documents. We have around 105,000 wooden documents, 645 sites, 5 or less have been actually completely excavated in full, and we know that some of them have text, and this is the end of this presentation at this moment. We have, for example, one site which we have looked at just there, which is what I call the Yangguan, which is the site between two passes, the Jade and the Yang on the south. And there we have a site which have been discovered. We've worked on it, exactly the same size of the Jade. And if you dig here, you may find some documents. Probably. On the south, for example, Yangguan also. Where is the Sun Gate? We don't know where is the Sun Gate, actually. We're not very sure. We have a lot of different possible locations. I have this feeling, because in archaeological fielding it's 90% of the problem of what we need. Feeling, you know. And when you look at the south part, we have this tower, D9T, from which we have a line coming out. So this is the southern part of the Nanhu Oasis, right there, which blocks probably the entry from the south. And here you have pictures of desert on one side. This is going west to Xinjiang. You do see the romance of Silk Road. No one wants to go on this side. And there you have this tower, and next to it you have some fortifications, probably with different kind of building settlements which are similar to those you see in the north of Dunhuang, here and here, for instance. Now, if I may indulge me just 1 minute. Yeah, okay, 1 minute, Alexis. Then it's your turn. I know. The question is, where do they go? How does it work? So we have to look at documents. We have to put them in connections with sites. This is something we have to do automatically, and materials. So this is what we're doing now in the CNRS with research work with my colleagues Olivier Bordeaux in charge of this research, for which we have some funding, working with both specialists of Chinese text, archaeologist Corinne de Francfort, who's been doing some digging, as you know, in Khotan and Jumbulak for a long, long time, and Ségolène, who works on the Uzbekistan side. So what we do is that we put in connection the documents we know from Xuanquan concerning Central Asian connections with dates on one side. Okay, I'll go quickly because if I start translating this, we're not finished. All right? And they indicate information about who's coming from which side and who are these people. And what we're doing with Olivier is this. You can take pictures, but it's really not useful. It's I've done it intentionally because it's a lot of work, you can see. And there's no GPS tracks in geography of the Northwest by archaeologists in China. So we spend literally our time sleeping with coffee looking at sites, okay? When we have time. That's night, very late. And so all these sites have been the result of mapping of forts from the 400 BC to 400 AD to try to understand exactly which kind of sites are located, what size, what kind of material. And so this gives us a micro-regional understanding of the complexity of this region. Kusha is very complex, Lutai is very complex, Mogao is very complex, Lunan is very complex, and you have sites like this in Huibaike, which is very important also. And to finalize this is the last slide, is that we have to look at what's going on in the West. We have to look at also what's going on before the Chinese expansion. Look at the Xiongnu presence also, and the Yuezhi presence, and other people we don't know about, which probably have given some clues for the Chinese expansion to know where they had to settle down, to understand local geography. And we have an oasis here, just there, between two oases. And in this place, we have a lot of archaeological missions that show that we have Neolithic sites going to the Ming Dynasty sites, and a lot of forts and ceramics, which can give us some indication about the occupation of these places prior the 2nd century BC. So you have to look at these kind of perspectives, I think, and this will close my remarks. Thank you very much for your understanding of the time I took, and thank you very much.